Hello, everybody, and welcome to Celebrating 50 Years of Excellence, UW-SP's College of Natural Resources. This is our 2021 Spring Seminar Series, hosted by Wisconsin Center for Wildlife and the College of Natural Resources. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. So this is the third seminar in our seminar series. And I would like to first, before we continue, thank some people that have helped make this possible. So first of all, this was, like I said, organized and co-organized by Wisconsin Center for Wildlife and by the College of Natural Resources. Stacy Allen Barnick helped me tremendously in organizing the seminar series, contacting speakers, working with the folks in the alumni office. So I'd like to thank her. And I also would like to thank the CNR faculty, discipline, and department coordinators. We reached out to each of them to help us identify some alumni to come and speak for us. So I'd really like to thank not only the discipline coordinators, but everybody within those disciplines that really helped us kind of find some people to speak. And they were really helpful in helping us organize this whole seminar series. And now, anytime we have a public facing event, we always like to have this acknowledgement. And so out of respect, we recognize the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point occupies lands of the Ho-Chunk and Menominee people. Please take a moment to acknowledge and honor the ancestral Ho-Chunk and Menominee land and the sacred land of all Indigenous peoples. And so now we have, this is the third seminar within our series celebrating the 50 years of the College of Natural Resources. And next week we have Carrie Rasmussen coming to talk to us about her experience as a land trust development coordinator. And all of our speakers are alumni. They all graduated from different disciplines through the decades in the past 50 years. So we would, and on the video, or most of these seminars will be recorded and they will be available on our YouTube channel afterwards if you were interested in seeing ones that you may have missed, but we'd like you to please consider joining us for future seminars. And finally, the director of Wisconsin Center for Wildlife, Scott Hingstrom, is going to say a few words about our anniversary.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's my great opportunity to be able to welcome everyone here to this seminar today. It's part of the seminar series that was constructed by our administration in the College of Natural Resources, and it's to celebrate 50 years of our existence. I recently had the opportunity to edit a book by Dr. Neil Payne, one of our former wildlife faculty here in the College of Natural Resources. And his book, it's entitled Wildlife Genesis in Wisconsin. It's a fascinating tour of how Wisconsin really was fundamental in developing the whole field of wildlife with Aldo Leopold and all of his graduate students, et cetera. But as a part of that book, Dr. Payne, being a pointer, he went on and talked about the history of the University of Stevens Point, the various departments that existed before the formation of the College of Natural Resources. Fred Schmeekley and Walter Silvestre were teaching a wide variety of courses in natural resources oriented fields back in the 1930s. And in 1946, the Department of Conservation Education was transitioned into what we now know of as the College of Natural Resources. And I think I have the math right. There's a 50-year period there anyway that we have been in existence. In that time, the College of Natural Resources has grown to what is known as one of the largest, if not the largest, institutions of higher education in natural resources. And many people will argue that it is the best institution in this field. And so with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Josh Robbie, who is going to be introducing our speaker today. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Scott. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Justine Hasz. So Justine, if you want to maybe go ahead and share your screen. Justine is going to be talking about her journey, so I don't really want to spoil her talk here. Maybe just a few teasers. She was born in Leicester, England. I hope that I got that right. And she received a bachelor's and a master's degree in Britain before coming to UW-Stevens Point, where she worked on her second master's studying walleye in Escanaba Lake. This is one of our kind of famous research lakes. After graduating, she stuck around in Wisconsin and worked lots of different positions with the Wisconsin DNR, including nearby in the Wisconsin Rapids office. There was a little while there where it seemed like every time I talked to Justine, she was in a new position. Basically, she kept climbing the ladder, and she became the director of the Bureau of Fisheries Management in 2015. She currently resides in St. Germain, which is up in Vilas County, where she enjoys doing lots of different outdoor activities with her husband and 2 rescue dogs, including fishing, which she can do by simply walking out her back door. I guess on a more personal note, I first met Justine while I was doing my master's here at Point back in the early 2000s. I especially met her. She was the treasurer and secretary for the Wisconsin chapter of the American Fisheries Society, which she did for many years. And I just remember she was always so friendly and welcoming, and also would remember my name, which is a really nice thing, especially when you're a young person trying to get started. And so that meant a lot to me. She would joke around that she remembers your name because she wanted your money. But what's really neat is, even though she's really climbed the ladder here, she's still the same person as when I first met her, albeit a little bit stressed out at times, but she's remained very humble. She's always honest and straightforward, and also a great sense of humor that I think will come out during her talk today. So with that, I'd like to pass off to Justine.
Thank you, Josh. Yes, I was quite excited when I was asked to do this presentation, and when I was trying to think about what I was going to talk about for my time at Point and what I've done since and those things. I was like, well, I'm probably one of the most unusual alumni of where I came from and how I got here, and the path I've taken since. And so I was saying before we got on this call, it was kind of fun. I got to go through a bunch of totes of photographs, actual real photographs, because a lot of my early years here were pre-digital cameras. So it was a lot of fun to go back and sort of reminisce about my time at Point. As Josh said, I lived in Rapids for a time here and worked pretty close to Point, so have kept my ties pretty close to Point. It really has become a family to me. And so what I want to go through with all of you today is sort of maybe I'm going to just touch a little bit about what happened before I came to the United States, and then really the wild ride that has been my career since I've been to Point, and the opportunities that Point created for me. And I'm a little unusual in my field. I mean, there are a few women in our field, but from the perspective of bureau directors, there's only one other female bureau director in the entire United States. So I'll talk a little bit too about the fact that, being a woman in a man's world can be interesting at times too. So there'll be a little bit of that put in here too. So I'm going to see if these slides click, and if Josh or someone lets me know if it's not working, that'll be good. So let's see if I can get there we go. So prior to coming to Stevens Point, to the US, I did get a bachelor's and a master's degree. And so I have a bachelor's degree from the University of Sunderland. And the pictures that you are seeing are not actually Sunderland. Sunderland is in the northeast part of England. If anybody knows of Newcastle Brown Ale, it's about 10 miles from Newcastle. I have my undergraduate degree was a combination degree of environmental biology, marine biology, and aquaculture. The undergraduate degree courses in the UK are a little bit different to the US. And so it is a 4-year degree. Normally a bachelor's degree is 3 years, and it's 4 years if it's called a sandwich course, which means you do a year-long internship. And I was fortunate enough, as part of my classwork, to go to Athens, Greece, and work at the Agricultural University of Athens, and then for 6 months as part of my classwork. And then I spent another year doing an internship, and these photographs are from my internship, where I worked on a marine fish farm, where we were raising sea bass and sea bream for the food market. And basically I was working on health issues with these fish, feeding rates, reduction in waste, increased growth, and those types of things. And so the internship lasted a year, and you do a project and then come back. Also slightly different with degrees in the UK. As part of an undergraduate, you do a thesis similar to a master's thesis, but not quite as in depth. And my thesis was on using hydrophilic polysaccharides as anti-fouling agents. And you're like, what the heck is that? So on large ocean going vessels, there's a lot of paint on these vessels. They paint these vessels with an anti-fouling paint to stop barnacles and other crustaceans from adhering to the hulls and eroding the hulls of these ships. The paint that they were using was leaching chemicals into the marinas and areas where these ships were docked, and they were changing the sex of animals that were in the water there. So winkles, some fish, some mussels were all being changed into males based off of this chemical leaching. So my project was based on trying to find a natural substance that could have these properties. I was not successful. However, there was somebody in Australia not too long after my undergraduate that was successful in finding a natural chemical that corals leach out, and have been using that ever since. So even though I didn't find the answer, it was cool that somebody else was also looking at that and doing that. When I finished my undergraduate work, and I should say, you know, from the age of 10, I wanted to be a marine biologist. I spent a lot of time going to the ocean along the coast of Britain, and I just was enthralled by seaweed and fish and other things. And so, you know, I'd had this career goal all along. So when I was done with my undergraduate degree, it's almost impossible to get a marine job if you only have an undergraduate degree. So I decided that I was going to go and I was going to get a master's degree. The master's degree program, again, in the UK is a little bit different than it is over here in the US. And I was lucky enough to get into the University of Aberdeen. You'll see that right now in 2020, or last year, not right now, the university was celebrating 525 years of being a university. And when I was there, it was celebrating 500 years. So it made me a little old when I pulled up this. I was like, oh my gosh, that was 25 years ago. But I got to have some amazing experiences during my time at Aberdeen. I worked with the British government, and this is their research vessel at the time. That's the research vessel Scotia. We went out and did Atlantic mackerel and juvenile cod surveys in the North Sea. And basically, these fisheries are very important commercial fisheries for the European Union. And so my work was looking at the maturity of these fish, the fecundity of these fish, and the overall population health status of these fish. So we got to go out on this boat for about 3 weeks at a time on the North Sea, and we had some fun weather. Anyone who's watched Deadliest Catch, yeah, I don't know how those guys even stand up. You know, these boats get tossed around pretty good in rough weather. Something else unusual that happened while we were there, just north of Aberdeen, and just for those of you geographically, I forget, you guys probably don't know where all these places are. Aberdeen is in the northeast portion of Scotland. So it's on a par with sort of central Alaska, if you look across the globe. And so while we were there, the upper right picture here is a couple of dead sperm whales. And because the university also had a veterinary program, we got to go to where these sperm whales had been beached and died, and actually got to perform autopsies on these animals. I did not put the gruesome a picture of the sperm whale cut open, but it certainly was some interesting opportunities that I had. Once I graduated from the University of Aberdeen with a master's in marine fisheries science, it's hard to find a job in the marine world. Even in the US, it's difficult to find a job in that. And so I was looking around, trying to figure out, you know, what I was going to do next. This is sort of the infancy of the internet. You know, we weren't really, you know, we didn't all have computers at home, et cetera. And I was in the library and I was searching jobs, and this research assistant came up on the American Fisheries Society website at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. And the initial title of the project was looking at spearing and catch rates of walleye in northern Wisconsin. And not to be mean to Wisconsin, but I had no idea where Wisconsin was. So the next thing I did was like, well, the project sounded very interesting to me. It was freshwater fish, but I was like, well, you know, a fish is a fish to me. And I wasn't sure where my career was going, so I thought I would look into it. And so the very first thing I did was like, Wisconsin, where's Wisconsin? So I got out an atlas and I looked at, you know, online, and I will honestly tell you, my entire decision to move across to the United States was looking at the Great Lakes and seeing Lake Superior and Lake Michigan and all that fresh water. And I was like, well, that can't be a bad place to live. That was like my ultimate decision maker in moving to Stevens Point. I have to say, Dr. Michael Hansen, you know, we phone called and we emailed and we went backwards and forwards, and he was like, you know, this is a second master's for you, explained how the system worked in the US. And I'm like, well, I don't have anything else to do right now. I was doing some volunteer work for the British government, continuing on from my graduate work with Atlantic mackerel. And I was like, well, I have nothing to lose. I can go for 2 years, and if I don't like it, I can go home. And so that was like my whole decision to move to Stevens Point. I apologize to the folks in Stevens Point that you weren't famous over in the UK, but you certainly are famous for me now. That choice to get on that plane and fly 4,000 miles on a very cold January and see snow, the amount of snow I have never seen before in my life, and experience cold temperatures that I have never experienced in my life. My first weeks here, I was like, what did I do? But I can honestly say it was the best decision I ever made to get on that plane. And my career, I don't know what I would be doing had I not made that choice. And so I owe a lot to Dr. Hansen and to the program at Point for getting me through that. So like I said, I got on that plane and I came over to Point. My graduate work was based out of the Escanaba Lake Research Station. In this slide, that's the bottom right, is the Escanaba Lake Station. It's down a 4-mile dirt road off of the main road. It does not have mains electricity. It still only has solar panels to this day. And it was just an amazing experience. The upper left picture is me doing a spring walleye survey out on Escanaba Lake. So part of my graduate work was to be at Point and be in class, and the other part of the graduate work was to work through this historical data, this data set that goes back to the 1940s from Escanaba Lake on the walleye populations. And obviously, I very quickly learned about ceded territory and tribal rights in the state of Wisconsin, and really got to understand the importance of the walleye to people in Wisconsin. And you know, so during the course of my classes and everything else, it was like, okay, these are great resources. I really enjoyed living in Stevens Point. I really liked living up in northern Wisconsin when I was working there in the summers. And you're probably wondering why in the world I would have a picture of my wedding in this presentation, but it really explains why I stayed. So, well, one, I married an American. He also has a fisheries background. He is from just outside Marshfield, Wisconsin. I met him whilst I was up at Escanaba Lake. But all the people that are in that picture, in that wedding picture, were graduate students who and a couple of undergraduate students who were at the College of Natural Resources, who really became my family. And probably over half of the people in that picture I'm in regular contact with. And I really feel like the connection that I made with the people as I was at school was really critical in sort of me staying here and deciding that I could make a life here and a career here. And so it was very important to me. And so it's a little strange for me to think about this journey that I took from this point forward, because when I got on that plane, I actually told my best friend in England at the time, I said, I'm going to be back in 2 years, I'll be back and it'll all be normal. And, 25 years later, I'm still here. And so it's not what I thought when I first got on that plane. And for those of you that don't know Dr. Hansen, this was my graduation day and Dr. Hansen. So once I had graduated, there's a lot of pointers out here, and there's a lot of people with a fisheries background, and there's a lot of opportunities. But as a non-US citizen, there are not federal opportunities for me. And as part of my graduate work, I was able to work at, like I said, at Escanaba Lake. That's a Department of Natural Resources research station. And I was able to work with lots of people with the Department of Natural Resources in the Woodruff area, which is where Escanaba Lake is situated. And so I was fortunate enough to immediately get a limited term employee job. So that's how a lot of people start in their careers in fisheries, whether it's in Wisconsin or somewhere else across the US, is getting these short-term jobs that get us experience. I was very fortunate. I did not have to wait long to get a permanent job. But some people, it does take a lot of time. But the experiences that I got as an LTE were invaluable. I mean, as for the job that I have now, all the steps and jobs I've taken have had a purpose, and is what connects me to the fisheries program and what connects me to the staff in my current role. And so in the upper left is this is Joelle. Joelle is a 30+ year employee of the DNR. She works out of the Woodruff office, and that was a spring survey, but we were doing creel together. So I was interviewing anglers, taking biological data off of fish, and really getting to know people and the resources in the northern part of the state. And again, another picture of a beautiful walleye out of Escanaba Lake. Was also doing a dual job there and working out of Escanaba Lake, doing spring survey work, whether it was working at the station where there's a mandatory creel where we have to interview everybody and measure every fish that is harvested, or doing spring fyke netting or electrofishing, all the different kinds of sampling that we do. So I was fortunate enough that I only had to be an LTE for about 18 months before I got my first permanent job with the DNR. So that first permanent job was as the Green Bay biologist, and I was pretty excited to get this job because, even as you've heard, my background was in marine fisheries, and so I really liked big water, and so I was very excited to have big water to be working on. The way those fisheries are managed are very similar to more oceanic fisheries, just because of the size and scale of the things that you're working from. There's a commercial fishery component to those fisheries as well. I had that job from 2000 to 2004, and you're going to hear some things here about how often I changed job. Like Josh said, I changed job quite a bit, and I don't suggest that is a path that everybody should take, but it is something that I did. It was choices that I made, and I can say when I took this job, when I first took it, I'm like, this is going to be my job for life, right? This is where I'm going to stay, and this is what I'm going to do. And it was a great job. I walked into this job not really knowing the situation of the population of yellow perch in Green Bay. It's the number one, at the time, it was the number one commercially fished fish in the Bay. It was also the number one sought after fish for anglers in the Bay, and the population was in major decline. And so I went in, I'm like 20 some years old. I had a very strong British accent at that point. And basically as I took that job, I cut commercial quotas 90%. I'm like, these people are going to hate me. But like Josh said, I treat people respectfully. I get to know who they are. I will joke with them. And to this day, those commercial fishermen still talk to me. They understood what I did. And to me, that was really important. That fishery is rebounded. It's not back to the level it was, but it has rebounded. And so the experiences of dealing with all of those different groups of people was very interesting. And then the other really cool part about Green Bay is there's sturgeon in it. And sturgeon is also a theme through my career, because as I've moved, I've always managed to be able to be in a location that's had sturgeon. This is a great prehistoric fish. Excuse me. And it's something that not every biologist ever gets to work with. And it was certainly something that's really special to me throughout my career. So as I said, I had this job from 2000 to 2004. I really enjoyed it. I loved all the different aspects of it. But then I got an opportunity to not actually physically move, but move job. And I I felt like I was not being challenged anymore. And I found as a person and for myself, in order to feel fulfilled in my job, I really needed to be challenged. So I was able to stay in the house I was living in and basically take another job, and move to inland to being an inland biologist. There's a lot of difference in this job. There's a lot of different things you do in that job. I had a great crew of people to work with. I went from managing a commercial fishery and this large scale fisheries to going backpack shocking in these small trout streams, working in areas where there were beaver dams, managing, putting in habitat for walleye, and then again, working with sturgeon, which, was really a blessing. Unfortunately, the picture got cut off, and the reason there's a picture of me, if I stood up now, I am only 5 feet tall, and I am standing on a 5-gallon pail in that picture because there was a joke about trying to get us all in the picture, and I'm about a foot to a foot and a half shorter than the gentleman in that picture, and so I always have joked that as I've gone through my work career, I've always had somebody who is at 6'6" or larger as my technician, as I was a biologist, because I needed that tall person to do the things this short person couldn't do. Um, Again, I held this job from 2004 to 2008, and I wasn't really looking for a move when I made my next move. There were some things that situationally came up for a family situation with my husband's family, because my whole family still lives in the UK, and the fisheries biologist position became available in Wisconsin Rapids. And that position was covering Adams, Wood, and Juneau counties. It was an interesting move. It brought me some bigger waters. Petenwell and Castle Rock flowages are the number 2 and 3 in size of inland lake after Lake Winnebago in the state. So again, these are large inland waters. They're managed. They're a little bit different to manage. There is also sturgeon populations in those systems as well, which was very exciting to me. And then again, we did a lot of beaver removal and trout stream habitat, trout stream surveys, some excellent musky fisheries in these areas. Another component of these jobs is spending a lot of time with the public, and in central Wisconsin, there is some very active sport fishing groups, especially the muskie and trout groups. And I really enjoyed spending time working with those groups and having them work with us as the agency to, as the Department of Natural Resources, to really, manage these resources together for everybody's benefit. And while I was doing that job, several people had commented to me that I would make a good supervisor. And I was just like, no, I want to be a biologist. I like to handle fish. It's fun to be out with the fish. I didn't put too many pictures in here of like those really freezing cold, snowy days that it sucks to be outside. But, that was my passion. I was sort of 10 years into my career, and I really hadn't thought about where a move would take me. And then people kept saying to me, you should try to be a supervisor. You've got a good personality for it. You should do that. And so basically based off of my coworkers, I decided that I should think about this. And I looked into, what does a supervisor do? What's the difference between being the biologist and, can I be fulfilled in my career and myself by doing that? I had gone to school, for fisheries, and I wanted to be able to handle the fish and do the data analysis and be able to implement those changes and see those changes on the landscape. So I took some leadership classes. I took some, we had this class at a time called Aspiring Supervisors that sort of gave you an in-depth look at what a supervisor did. And then I realized that maybe this was something that I should be looking into. So about 4 years into this job, about 2012, so we're getting a theme here of 4 years. I'm going to break that theme in a minute. But after 4 years in this job, I was able to get the supervisor position also in Wisconsin Rapids. And this is where things changed a little bit for me. I did supervise, so basically I supervised the western part of the state. I had staff in the Eau Claire office, I had staff in Black River Falls, Wausau, and Wisconsin Rapids, and covered about 17 counties of that area. And the next step I made was not planned at all. I think, again, it was really other staff talking to me about what they saw in me, and how they wanted to support me in a career path that I probably had not, I really hadn't thought about until this point. So I held the Wisconsin Rapids team supervisor job for about 18 months. And I really did enjoy it. I really enjoyed being able to help the staff in that 17 county area do the job I used to do, right? So get out there, do the surveys, make sure these resources were available for everybody else. And I felt like, I was giving them tools to do that. And that was important to me that I could do that. And they let me go in the field once in a while. They didn't completely make me sit in an office. So that was really helpful too. So after about 18 months in that job, what was called the Fisheries Management Section Chief position came open. So section chiefs are sort of, a step up. They're normally based out of our Madison office. They oversee things on a statewide basis. This section chief position was really, it was on the administrative side of the fisheries program for the DNR. So what I did was, this position was managing the budgets, it was managing hiring, it was managing, the strategic planning for the program, prioritization of the work that we did, and those types of things. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do or not do. And in the interim, I should say, I almost forgot this part. So the section chief position came available because there had been a shift in bureau director, and the bureau director had been in place for 15 years. His name was Mike Staggs, and that position had become available. And on a complete whim, for no reason whatsoever, I had applied for that job and I didn't get it. And I was like, okay, that's fine. But I got the interview panel for that job was 8 or 9 people, and I got feedback. Every one of them called me with feedback from my interview and was like, you really need to be focused on this. You'll be really good at this. You should do this. And half of these people I didn't even know. So the person that had the section chief job got the bureau director job. And so when this one came up, everyone's like, you need to go for it. And so I did, based off of everybody else. I mean, it wasn't, I also had to make that decision for myself, but the support of everybody else around me gave me that energy and that enthusiasm to be like, okay, I should go ahead and do that. So that's what I did. And I got the section chief job. And what happened next was most certainly not in my plan whatsoever at all. So I got the section chief job, and about 7 months after getting that job, the person that had got the bureau director job had to retire for medical reasons. And so it's almost 6 years ago, to about a week ago now, it was 6 years ago, I was asked if I would step in and take the acting bureau director position. So that's while they're trying to fill a job, they'll have somebody take that role on. And I said, sure, thinking it was going to be 6 weeks, and it was 6 months. So I took on that role, and there were very challenging times. I took on, they asked me to do it. I said yes. The next day, the state budget came out. It eliminated 16 positions in the fisheries program. It cut money from us. And I'm like, whoa, I don't know that I can do this. And then I thought about what the program means to all the staff that work in it. I thought about all the stakeholders that use those resources across the state and what it means to them. And I'm like, you don't have a choice. You need to figure out how to do this. And so I spent 6 months acting doing this. Then they decided to fill the position. and I took the position. So I've been in this job permanently for 5.5 years. So I broke my streak now of 4 years, and then this quick hiatus of all these jobs in between, where Josh was saying it's like every time you talk to me, I got another job, where it was really, I went from a team supervisor to a section chief to a bureau director in less than a 2-year time span. And I don't know that I would recommend that route in that speed to most people. It most certainly was a challenge, but when I said before, I kept switching job. I like to switch jobs because I wanted to be challenged. I can promise you, I don't think I will ever not be challenged in this job. And so I did want to talk a little bit about what you're directed to do, right? What is the person who's leading this program, where I started as a Creel clerk, which is probably, that's a lowest paid position in our agency, to the top person in this program. And I did this in 15 years. And so, when I think about it and I talk about it, it makes me exhausted to think that's how quick this took. But I have to say, there was a lot of people supporting me on the way. There were a lot of people who have graduated from Stevens Point who work for us. They were in graduate school with me. They were undergrads while I was in graduate school. And it's really fulfilling for me and my job to see them doing well and be able to provide them the tools for them to do that job. So what do I do every day? And I had to do this because it's like, this is what I do. I sit in meetings. I sit in lots and lots and lots of meetings. And I had to put a Zoom one in the middle because that's what our life looks like right now, right? It's lots of Zoom. But these are some real specific things that I really wanted to touch on of what I do and what is the importance of the role that I play, even though I don't get to touch fish very often anymore. All the things I do make everything available for my staff and for the people that use these resources. So upper left is Council of Great Lakes Fisheries Advisors meeting. And this is sort of where I'm going to comment about how many males are in all these pictures. And I can say it was challenging at first. The Council of Great Lakes Fisheries Advisors, I'm the designated advisor for the governor of the state of Wisconsin to that committee for both Lake Superior and Lake Michigan for the state of Wisconsin. And, we jointly manage that fishery. And there's one other lady that sits at the table with all the rest of the states. And otherwise, it's a pretty male-dominated field. And the first few meetings I went to, I can tell you, I felt a little overwhelmed. There were a couple other national meetings. I'm also a Wisconsin representative on multiple committees for the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. And as I said before, there's only one other female Bureau Director level fisheries person in the US right now. And I was only the second one. The first female fisheries chief was in Illinois. And so sometimes it's a little hard to break into that sort of group of men who have been together a while, because the other thing you'll notice in that picture for the Council of Great Lakes Fisheries Advisors is maybe the age of some of the folks in that room. That is, they've been together a long time, a long time career people in these jobs. And so it can be a little hard. But as Josh said before, I have the personality that I go into that room and I get to know who you are and I remember your name, although I'm getting older and that gets a little harder, but I remember your name and I remember things about your family if you tell it to me, because to me, to have that connection really builds those relationships with these folks. And now I don't even really notice it when I go in those rooms that I am like, the minority in that room. And I have to say, I really like the fact when we have breaks, there's never a line at the ladies' room. So it's always easy to go to the bathroom. That's a plus. In my book, there's never a line. On the other side of the screen on the right, this is an internal fisheries meeting. This is something really important to me, is not only is all these national meetings where we're talking about national policies, or these joint borders where we have to manage our fisheries across those borders. What's just as important to me is our internal staff, our internal processes, working together to come up and use new innovative ideas to manage the fisheries. We don't have more money We have a pretty stable budget. It doesn't really change. After a decade, our funding looks almost identical. And so, we are trying to look at easier ways for our staff to do work, safer ways for our staff to do work. Stocking fish is a huge part of what we do at the Department of Natural Resources. We stock, 7.8 million fish a year, every year, and they cost a lot of money to raise. And so for me, it's looking at all those efficiencies, working with these staff, and then using our staff as the resources to get to that end. And so that's what that picture is. And then in the middle, the Zoom is our natural resources board. So, I have to work with, so that this is our governing body for the Department of Natural Resources. I also work with state legislators, the governor's office. When I say that, I sometimes think, how did I get this job? I'm not sure how I'm qualified to do this, but I do it every day. And so, our Natural Resources Board is made up of citizens from the state. And so building relationships with these people, this is where we bring our regulations to. If I want to change a fishing regulation, if a biologist submits and wants to change a fishing regulation on a lake, so I have to pass it through this board, through the Conservation Congress and others in order to get this put into place. And so I always joked about how we all do all the fish classes and the math classes. And I remember we had to take a humans dimensions class. And at the time, like, why in the world do we need human dimension classes? And honestly, from being a krill clerk to every biologist position, all the way to where I'm at now, the number one thing I need is experience in dealing with other human beings. The fish, they don't talk back to you. They might slap you in the face once in a while, like a sturgeon or a muskie, but they don't, they do what they do, and you biologically and scientifically can do what you do with them. The biggest thing in our jobs at every level in our program is dealing with human beings, whether it's an angler, a commercial fisher, a charter captain, members of the Natural Resources Board, a legislator, a business owner whose business depends on fishing. I always remember thinking when I took that class in Point, I'm like, why would I need this? And now I'm like, I needed more of that. And that's something I've always remembered, that there's a reason why we were asked to take that class, because they knew that we would need this. So then outside of all the time I spend in meetings, all the time I spend on phones, all the time I spend doing email, I really should have put a picture of my inbox up here, although it might have hurt your head, of how many emails we get. I do have to say, all those things do fulfill me, but there are certain things in my job that really drive me. And mostly it's the people that I work with, and it's the people that we do this for. And so, and I do have to say, my staff, the staff across the state, don't completely eliminate me from doing field work anymore. I will joke that the bottom right picture was from the summer of 2019. And the Green Bay biologist, Tammy Paoli, she called me. She's like, we haven't caught any perch. She goes, you need to come out on the boat. And I'm like, okay, I'll come out on the boat. I fortunately had a day off, so I drove up to Green Bay, hopped on the boat with them. And these were the first perch they had got in the survey. And there was jokes about me being a perch whisperer, because when I was the Green Bay biologist between 2000 and 2004, in 2002, we had the largest year class ever recorded since 1973 on Green Bay. And so there's always this joke amongst the Green Bay biologists about this standard. And so now apparently I am on call if they're not catching any perch in their first few trawls. There's a call to me, and if I can't make it, I'll video chat them on the boat to try and get them some good vibes to get some fish. I really don't think I have that much power over those perch, but if they feel good about it, then I feel good about it. In the middle at the top, we were working with a private grower to grow some steelhead for Lake Michigan. And I was going up there to talk to the gentleman about how the program was working for him. And our staff were up there coated wire tag marking these steelhead. And so I feel it's very important for me to jump in and work with them. I'm not just going to stand there and watch them, because part of being, a good boss and overseeing the program is understanding what it is that everybody's job is. And they didn't fire me on that day, so that I was pretty lucky that I got to do that. The other pictures in here, a couple of them are awards that we gave to our own staff. I think it's very important to recognize, the hard work that our staff do, and how, people go above and beyond every day in their job to make these fisheries resources available for everybody in the state. And I really like to acknowledge those staff that have really gone above and beyond. And the other couple of pictures in here are our stakeholder groups. So these are groups that have worked side by side with our field biologists, our technicians, our hatcheries. The bottom one is a school group that does a co-op of raising brook trout to be stocked in the driftless area. And it really is great for me to go talk to those groups and really thank them for the importance of them being involved in managing the resources, because without them, without people buying fishing licenses, and without groups like those, we don't exist as the DNR, we don't exist as a fisheries program. And I have to say, these things are so fulfilling in my job. It makes those really hard days and those hard decisions that I have to make, and some of the stressful things that I have to do, through the meetings and working, through political dramas and those things are made worthwhile to me by the staff and by the public, being engaged in the resource. And so that's really, really, important to me. And finally, the true reason why I do my job is this. I had never fished in my life until I came to Stevens Point. I had, it's not something that is readily available in the UK to most people. Water resources, water law, access to fishing is not the same. And so I came and I had several, the DNR folks that I worked with right away at Escanaba Lake, the first thing they did was make me get a fishing license and took me fishing. And I do have to say, I may have had more hunting pictures than fishing pictures when I first started looking. And I was like, oh my God, I'm just gonna have to show you all dead turkeys and deer. But I think people don't understand, they don't know that this resource that this state has is just not available everywhere to everybody in other parts of the world. I am, I think I have a very big smile in all of these pictures, because it doesn't get old to me. I don't care whether it's that tiny walleye at the bottom there, or it's that jumbo 14-inch crappie that I'm holding with my excellently manicured nails, I noticed. There's always a joke about that too. When I have perfectly manicured nails when I'm fishing, my staff tell me that's what they can tell me. I do a desk job now because of my nails. But I really truly believe that, in my job, it's also part of my job to go out and enjoy the resource that's available. And that's also super fulfilling to myself. And I just sort of want to wrap up with, I have taken a interesting ride in the last 15 years. Like I said, when I got on that plane in 1997, I think it was January 1997, or it might have been 1996. Some days I forget. I'd have to go back and look at my immigration paperwork, but I had no idea that this was the ride I was going to take. I think the point has, it holds a very dear place in my heart, because it brought me to the US. It brought me some very good friends into my life, and it has brought me a career that I could not have dreamed of. And so I'm just really appreciative for the experiences that I got in going to Point. And I'm a huge supporter. We try to come watch hockey once a year. It's hard with my schedule now because I travel a lot. Big supporter of the student chapter of the Fisheries Society there. And I do feel very blessed to have been a pointer, and will hold it real close in my heart for forever. So with that, I am open to answer any questions about the crazy career path I took, or how to get a job at DNR, or what kinds of jobs we have, what opportunities they are, and those types of things. So thank you. And I think Jennifer, do you want me to stop sharing?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Um,
All right. There we go.
I'm trying to turn on my own video now.
I have 3 screens and sometimes I get lost. I can't find my mouse. I'm like, where did it all go?
It's a little overwhelming, but gosh, thank you very much. That was really, really interesting. So I'd like to open it up to questions now. There is a chat box for the participants. If you have any questions, go ahead and enter them into the chat box, and we'll ask them, and we will read them off, and Justine will answer them. And I think that, especially for the students in the room, this is definitely a good time to ask some questions about career paths and things like that. Or I guess if you just want to know. Have you developed a favorite recipe for walleye or, so far? Or
My favorite recipe is my husband cooking it for me.
I like it. Okay, so so Josh, if you'd like to do the Q&A, that'd be great. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, Justine, I don't know if you can read them. Otherwise, I'm happily do it. So first, Brian Sloss just said, proud to have you as one of our alumni. You're a true leader and one representative of our college and our field. And I'll just second that. You've been a great role model for all of us, but especially, it's great to have a female a role model as well. So thank you very much. We have one from Carrie Rasmussen. She says, hi from Boulder Junction. She lives really close to Escanaba. She was wondering how this place has contributed to state fisheries as a whole, meaning Escanaba.
Wow, I could talk for an hour on that. For those that don't know, there are 5 lakes. There are research lakes. The Escanaba Lake Station is based on the largest lake in those sets of lakes. And really, it's not only for Wisconsin, but also Midwest and nationally, the lakes and the research that's been able to be done on those lakes, because we're able to do some different things on those lakes than we can do just across the landscape, basically for research reasons. So, from a walleye perspective, the regulations that have been historically on that lake, where it was unlimited harvest, no size limit, no bag limit year round, to now we've had a 1/28, and we're going to be looking to change that regulation. I say we, I'm talking Greg Sass and the Office of Applied Science team here at DNR. The data that we've been able to collect on just the walleye fishery alone, that was plugged into how we manage the harvest system for the ceded territory between the tribal harvest and the state harvest of fish. It really has been instrumental in many, many aspects of management of the fisheries in Wisconsin and further afar, especially for walleye.
All right. Well, yeah, feel free to put some questions there, or we can always do raise hands as well. I guess I have one. With all this COVID, and you had hosted the room, coping with all these challenges with COVID at our fisheries meeting. It's both good and bad. Seeing way more people using our resources. Have you guys kind of talked about, some potential issues that may have came from, more and more people are out fishing and hunting, but also how we can, build on that momentum?
Yeah, so we have, so just in case people aren't aware of how many people actually fish in Wisconsin. So you have to be over there. Anybody under 16 doesn't need a fishing license. So these numbers don't include those. So we average about 1.3 million licensed anglers in the state, and about 300,000 of those are non-resident anglers. So, fishing is big business in the state. And last year we had 93,000 first-time license buyers. So that's people who had either never bought a license before or who had not bought a license in the past decade. Ice fishing has certainly shown unbelievable numbers of people ice fishing, talking with the local bait stores up here and across the state. We do have, from my perspective of how a fishery manages this huge influx of anglers this past year, is really in our management tools. It's in the surveys that we do. COVID was definitely challenging because we weren't able to do every survey in the survey types that we normally do to help manage those fisheries. We're working on new protocols for this spring. But we are going to be looking at it, and we're going to take it as an opportunity. We're self-funded through license sales. It sounds a little weird. Almost all of our funding comes from people buying a fishing license. So part of what we're trying to do is increase people into that activity, but at the same point, we need to protect that resource so that everybody, all that increased number of people have it to go to. There's definitely, we've been talking as we are working on our research agenda right now for the next couple of years, and we've certainly been talking about some things that we should be looking at to see, whether 2 to 3 years from now, are we going to see a blip in some of these populations based off of the increased number of anglers we had in 2020? And well, the way the ice fishing is going, 2021 might almost see the same increase or maybe more too. So we are going to watch it closely.
All right, we did get a few new ones. So Becky's a grad student that just finished up here. She said, thanks. Super cool story. She's just curious, during your early career, not only being a woman, but also from another country, were there any reoccurring issues or cultural differences that were difficult for you, and how did you deal with them?
Yeah, there were certainly some cultural differences from being from the UK to here. There are certain words I say that are swear words here, and I found that out pretty early. It's hard not to do that. I think I do have to say, when I first started, so my first permanent job was in 2000, and I think the biggest challenge I faced was more with our stakeholders. The stakeholder groups that we spend a lot of time with are very male dominated, sort of 60-year-old, very white. And, when I came in and I was trying to talk to them and tell them, things that my male counterpart was saying, they just listened to, it was like they were, tuning out their wife. And that was kind of hard, right? It's like, okay, I have the same education as these people. And really it was, the challenge was to just sit down and talk with them and interact with them probably in a slightly different way that they have been interacted at. And I spent a lot of time gaining that trust. And my male counterparts have to do that too. They have to gain a lot of trust. But I think the biggest thing was really, I felt like I had to work a lot harder to get that trust, because they were just not used to seeing a female in that realm. What is interesting now is when I go into those rooms with people that have known me for 20 years, like they have a very different attitude about me because they've known me that long. But then that spills over to new people in their room who haven't met me. And so, but it still is a challenge to this day. It's, there are certain sectors that just look at you slightly differently. And, I think, my role that I'm in now is to help that change for people coming up. We have quite a few female staff, but like I said, the biologist that has Green Bay now, Tammy, she spent a lot of time talking with me about the challenges, even in the field, just the challenges of being a female in waders all day. Gentlemen, it's not as easy for us to go to the bathroom in the woods. It's just, even those simple things, and having my male counterparts at work understand that that is not as easy, and that, there are differences. But overall, I think I am seeing changes in how women are viewed in this field, and I'm excited to see how many women are coming into this field. I think it's a good thing for us.
It's a lot of great insight. I know when I had my first LTE position, I think Sue Byer was the only fisheries biologist, if I remember right.
She was, yeah.
She's the first one, and so definitely lots of change since when I first started, which is awesome. All right, guys, scroll up here. So we had one from Scott Hengstrom. He said, thank you for a very interesting presentation. You mentioned the NRB. I assume that Natural Resources Board in the wildlife world, the relationship with the DNR has been a little frosty, including things with deer and wolves. How's the relationship with the fisheries world?
Scott, you should go watch some of the Lake Michigan conversations at the Natural Resources Board. We deal with often we're dealing with very controversial topics in front of that group, and that group is really trying to work right with the stakeholders who are coming from both sides at them, as well as us. Again, it's all in that relationship building. I would say ironically, COVID, I think, has been a huge benefit. We have had much more one-on-one briefings with the board members. with COVID because we're just doing everything electronically. And really it's just spending a lot of time with them, going over, they're dealing with topics that are everyday conversation in my world, but they're not an everyday conversation in their world. So we've figured out that, we often come in and talk way over their heads on a topic, and we don't want to talk dumb to them, but we want to talk to them so they understand. And so really just coming at the topics with them that we're bringing in front of them. I mean, for 3 years, I was like, oh my gosh, this is just a major challenge. But I would say in the last 2 years to 18 months, a lot of change, but a lot of it is just, again, building those relationships with those members on that board, and having open conversation. And but it's, we still go to battle every time I bring a lake trout rule for Lake Superior or a rule for Lake Michigan in front of them, because they're just really, they're passionate issues that a lot of people have a lot of interest in. There's a lot of people have a lot of money invested in the fisheries. I mean, a little bit different to wildlife, like I said, there are commercial fisheries there on the Mississippi. We have rough fish commercial fisheries. We have commercial fisheries on Lake Superior and on Lake Michigan. People's livelihoods depend on having those fish in those waters, and it trickles down because those fish are sold to a restaurant and so on. And so when we talk about those fisheries, they're always going to be contentious, I think, when we go through the board. But again, just building those relationships with the board members that, our staff are looking at. Our goal, and the staff's goal, is to look out for those resources and make sure those businesses and the anglers have something to go fish for in the future.
All right, we have a specific fisheries type question from Benny Magaliski, relating to the COVID increase in fishermen. What is your take on having a statewide 10 fish daily limit on panfish?
I wouldn't like it. I love panfish. So I'm kidding. All joking aside, as Josh said before, I do like to joke, but I can be very serious too. So, it's interesting because there's, like I just said about Lake Michigan and the other lakes, you've got a group of people on one side that are going to pro and a group that are con. And there are reasons why 10 panfish may not be a good idea, even with increased fishing, if, depending on the growth rates and the populations in lakes. We do have we're in a pilot, and I think it's funny to call it a pilot because it's a 10-year pilot project, because we need to be able to have the fish go through a couple of life cycles. But we do have a pilot on 100 lakes where we've changed the bag limits. We've got 10 in combination. We've got some that are 5, 5, and 5, and things like that, to really see what are other options we can have. And if we see increased fishing, if we reduce that bag limit to 10, do we see better growth in the fish? Do we see better size structure? Do we see better recruitment? Or are we not really seeing a change? So, partly it's on the pressure and how many fish are being taken out, but it's also on what can Mother Nature do with those fish, and looking at that. So we're pretty close. We're starting our panfish surveys right now. We're coming into year 6 of that pilot. And so we're actually going to be doing a survey of not all anglers, but random anglers on lakes where we have these special regulations coming this spring. There's going to be online surveys going on, and then we're going to start our actual physical, netting surveys to take the biological data on these fish. So potentially we are going to see some panfish regulation changes across the state. And that's kind of the exciting thing the staff get to do, and that we get to do with the stakeholders is, all the stakeholders fishing these lakes, they're part of this research. They're part of this pilot to determine what's appropriate for the different lakes across the state. So I'm excited to see what the results are, although I'm not sure I can only keep 10 panfish, but
Yeah, the panfish has really been a focus, I think, of some neat research, including looking at, use of electronics and some other aspects. So I think, there's obviously people love their panfish, including you, apparently.
Yes, I do. I like walleye too, but
For people that are interested, Scott just posted a kind of the update of for some numbers of how we got to 50 years. If you're interested, that's in the chat room. Any other questions at the moment for Justine? Great opportunity. You don't get the direct access to Justine too often here.
I don't get direct access to myself very often.
Well, that's kind of looking like it's it. So Jennifer, I don't know if there's any closing things that you wanted to add or anything like that.
No, I would just like to take a moment once again, to thank Justine so much for being here. This was really great, really informative, really interesting. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. And with that, I want to thank everybody for coming as well, and consider joining us next week for our next presentation with Carrie Rasmussen.